Brady, I want to ask you something because in preparing for last week's Super Wildcard game, I was looking around it, and you touched on it, Lige. Jim Schwartz, the DC for the Browns, primarily plays cover one, little cover three, so one middle of field safety. And CJ Stroud and the Texans offense struggled against that throughout the course of the year. The touchdown pass to Dalton Schultz was 2 high safeties.
Yeah,
how do you as a quarterback? Yeah, how do you as a quarterback? Number one, why would he struggle against cover one? And number two, how do you adjust going into that game? Because they were lighting the Browns up.
Yeah, well, there's a few things. I think one, when quarterbacks are going up against cover one, a lot of times people will say, well, the quarterbacks struggle. It's not the quarterbacks that struggle. It's usually the guys they're throwing to that are going to struggle to get open, get separation, right? You're talking about tighter windows. Really for a quarterback, if you give me man-to-man, I am good, okay? Because I most likely know my man beaters. I know the matchup that I want to work to. It's all about figuring out what type of man coverage it is. Another thing is, it's probably handling pressure. Because a lot of teams in the NFL, when they bring pressure, they want to play some sort of man-to-man coverage behind it. And you're most likely, depending on the type of pressure or the type of man coverage, not going to have your back. So you're not going to have that outlet. So when people say, well, this guy struggles versus man-to-man coverage, well, it's probably because he doesn't have an outlet or check down because the back's taken away. And then he's probably going to have, if it's a timing mechanism, that's going to be impacted, especially if it's press, man-to-man coverage where there's going to be a jam, or even the depth of the route, right? Like if I'm normally throwing a route that's supposed to be a 9-yard stop, might not be at 9 yards because of the press man-to-man coverage and timing element to that. So all those things play a factor into what is not an exact science, but making it even less of an exact science. That's usually why the combination of pressure, the combination of lack of ability to get open, a little tighter window, that plays a role in guys maybe struggling versus man-to-man. But I would say across the board, that's usually the case. Like if you want to give zone coverage, that's great. We'll find the windows for zone coverage. If it's a match zone, different story, we can get into that. But it was interesting because even when the Browns did go to that zone coverage, and you point out the Dalton Schultz play where they got Ronnie Hickman isolated on Schultz, they still were able to find those mismatches and still able to find those holes and really shots that they were taking downfield, whether it was Emerson, whether it was Hickman. The Texans really didn't feel like threatened at all. I thought Bobby Slowick did a tremendous job scheming things up, and then obviously CJ Stroud executing on those plays.
Well, to add to that, Brady, because I was like you, I was enamored by Bobby Slowick in his first playoff game. I was telling him he needed to save some of that, keep it in the chamber for next week for his Baltimore. I hope he didn't blow his wad in that first game. But we were talking about this earlier too, Brady, the protection element of it, right? The Houston Texans did a great job of
Tunsil, though.
Oh my gosh, man.
Tunsil was incredible.
Top two, and I would honestly say he's pushing Trent Williams as the best offensive tackle in football. I mean, just from a skill point, position. Laremy Tunsil, what he was able to do with Myles Garrett, again, a lot of people haven't been able to block this guy one-on-one. We saw it numerous times. He was singled up with Myles Garrett, and he didn't let him touch CJ Stroud. So a lot of times when you talk about when you're playing man coverage in that back end and guys are bringing pressure, they were giving CJ Stroud just a little bit of extra tick, and then he did a really good job of pocket awareness, maybe shifting to the left or right just to buy a little bit of time to throw open to Nico Collins in some of those situations. A lot of bad tackling from the Browns as well that added to them struggling in this game. But you know this as a quarterback or any player, right? When you start making plays, doesn't matter what a defense does to you after that. You start seeing the windows in zone coverage. You start knowing where to go in man coverage. I think he built his confidence up early in that first quarter. So even when Jim Schwartz decided to switch things up, he was like, I know what you're doing. I know exactly where to go with the football. So just a kudos again to Bobby Slowick, also CJ Stroud in that offensive line.
That's the funny thing, and not to just kind of go into it like, the X's and O's of any sort of game, but the reality is, too, when you start hitting on stuff right away as far as your openers, you've got a really good feel for what they're trying to do or what they're trying to take away. Yeah. And it's really the defense that's trying to make adjustments. And typically you watch enough film to know, hey, after you beat them for a few big plays, like usually they settle into something. There's a safe coverage. There's a safe defense a defensive coordinator is going to play. Yep. And that's where, like, you see the Dalton Schultz play. It's like, well, even in a too-high look like that, doesn't matter. They're still going to try to find a way of throwing a haymaker and throwing a shot against you. And that might have been in a response because we're not matching up well in man. We're not matching up well in post-eye zone. Let's kind of mix some things up and see how the rookie handles it. Still pass it with flying colors. So it becomes really hard for any defensive coordinator, Dan Quinn included, with the way the Packers came out versus the Cowboys, to make adjustments when you can't get anything going right, right? It's like we're just trying to stop what we already saw and was executed in front of us. We can't even stop the next thing that's coming down the pipeline.
And Ryan, I know you got to move on, but I love that you brought up that point, Brady, because I was on Twitter and everybody was saying, why are they playing this much zone? You know, the Cowboys play a lot of men. I think Dan Quinn knew with those young receivers for the Green Bay Packers, if he put those corners on islands, it might be a long day because he went zone, then he went back to man, and they were still getting cooked in man, even with a free safety over the top. So they were running over routes and turning them into sevens. And, you know, the Dallas Cowboys corners, they're aggressive. They like to jump those over routes. And the Green Bay had a plan for that, right? They turned those overs into corners, and Dan Quinn and the defense had no answer for it.
No.